Welcome to Summit University. Today our guest is Steven Acuff. He's a best-selling author and lecturer on health and diet in Europe and the United States. Mr. Acuff specializes in the macrobiotic diet. He is an instructor at the Cushy Institutes in Massachusetts and a nutritional counselor at a medical clinic in Germany. He is also director of a macrobiotic center in Sweden. Mr. Acuff is here today to talk about Oriental Diagnosis.
So this session we're going to continue with our questions and answers, and I find it very valuable. I only wish that I had the time to answer more questions because these questions are important, and it's, in the end, the central issue of making this kind of lifestyle with this kind of natural food work for you. So one question I have here, is there anything wrong when someone thinks about food all the time? The answer is yes. Next question. Yeah, when you think about food all the time, they can have different causes, of course. Number one is you're not finding nourishment in your life in other ways. People that think about food all the time usually are not filling their day with their life. They may also be lacking the nourishment of a life partner. So we seek our nourishment than just with food. So try to create a lifestyle which is so filling that you sometimes forget to eat. That's what happens to me, and it's great. It's not always easy, but life is a challenge, and we just hang in there and work at it, step by step, working ourselves forward in our development. Also, some people will think about food a lot because they get a lot of blood sugar problems. And so then it's related to hunger. If you're getting hungry a lot, and that's why you're thinking about food, then you probably have some blood sugar problems. But if it's just a psychological thing, it's usually something that's on other levels you need to deal with. Psychological counseling is not necessarily the way to do it. Maybe it will help, but my experience is that you really just have to go through yourself, find out how you can do things better, how you can make your life more constructive. Then one quick question here about different blood types needing different kinds of food. And I wanted to mention this because this person asked me if I had heard about a doctor working in this field of 3 different basic metabolic types. And yes, I have heard of it. And it is a very interesting theory that blood type O people generally need to eat meat and heavier protein things now and then to feel good, is the theory. That other people, like the other blood types, can either handle easily pure vegetarian or balanced or somewhere in there, but in any case are not so dependent on heavy protein foods. Now, I am type O and have eaten meat twice in the last 22 years, both times with the spirit of experimenting. Once it was a piece of meat from a biodynamic farm where they were using the Rudolf Steiner method of only biodynamics, and they said, please try this because this meat you'll surely like. And so I did. And I regretted it immediately. So I am, however, someone who enjoys eating fish. I have never eaten total vegetarian macrobiotics. I might try it sometime, but I find with my intense schedule that I feel good with the fish now and then. So in my experience, I'm not sure that that's true, but I wouldn't rule it out. I know some people who are type O's who do seem to need something stronger than fish now and then. And I even got a couple of questions about that. People said, I don't feel good unless I eat meat now and then. Now, if that's the way you feel, maybe it's the right thing for you, because real macrobiotics is not a dogma that's placed on people, but rather it's self-discovery. Or another way we could say is macrobiotics doesn't give us the answers to questions so much as it tries to figure out which questions to ask. So we ourselves have to find the answers. And if you feel good eating meat, then think about taking small quantities of good meat. That's like wild meat. In any case, don't support the modern mass production industry, which is taking your money and investing in an ecologically destructive practice. So, whether or not there's any corresponding with the Ayurvedic medicine, I'm not sure of how that goes with yin and yang, because the Ayurvedic system is a 3 system, and I haven't dealt with it enough to be able to make the comparison with yin and yang. There is one that seems to be clearly yin and one that seems to be clearly yang, and the other is kind of mixed. My experience with Ayurvedic medicine has been that it is better for yang problems than yin problems, because it's a very yin kind of medicine. So, then we'll run right down the list here. I already mentioned homeopathy in a different context, but I was asked about macrobiotics and homeopathy. I think that it's very good to do this kind of alternative things if you don't lose the greater perspective. The greater perspective is that you're trying to create balance in general and not get lost in symptomatic adjustments. I know some homeopathic practitioners who laugh at the idea that food affects your health. Total nonsense. I know others who use it very creatively in connection with conventional medicine and macrobiotics. I have seen people recover from different acute problems with homeopathic means, and because it comes originally from Germany, I am very often in contact with people getting homeopathic treatments, and I see a lot of good coming out of it. So it's the mentality behind it which decides. Then there was a question about what's the correct diet for the common ailments of our society. Let's say in general, just to wrap this up quickly, again and again we have the same problems coming. Number one, it's too much saturated fat. It's too much cholesterol, it's too much protein. These products are all found, interestingly enough, in animal food. So, cutting back on the animal food is number one. Also, if this planet is going to find some kind of ecological balance, there is no future for consuming the amount of animal food we're doing today. A few weeks ago, I read an interview with Dennis Meadows, who wrote The Limits of Growth. And he has now come out with a revised edition for the 90s. He was the first person as part of the Club of Rome who in 1970 made the world aware that this big joyride that we're on was not going to last forever, of consumption, consumption, consumption. At that time, he had all the wrong ideas. He said that our resources are going to run out. It's going to be a problem. Now we're realizing it's actually the results of the consumption, pollution, which is going to grab us faster than our resources running out. In any case, the journalist, a very sharp woman, very clear, she said, "What are you doing personally about this? You write so much about it." He said, "Well, very easy. First of all, I've become a vegetarian." He said, it's become very clear to him that if this society continues to rely heavily on meat, there will be a disaster, an ecological disaster in the future. So let's get away from that. Then highly refined carbohydrates, sugar, white flour, we've talked about it already. Those are the big problems. So let's get rid of those. And it's important to stress the negative things too, because people sometimes say, what should I do for this problem? And if you delve into it more, you find out that they're taking these things, trying to improve their system, and then they're keeping these little hobbies on the side. So then they're trying to, do it right, but then a little bit of chocolate anyway, and then stay with this and a little bit of that. So let's get rid of those things that are a problem, and then we can really start to create health. So here it says things like, this person says, I have discovered I have high blood pressure. Someone who has discovered high blood pressure, a stroke, heart attack, those kind of things. Basically, it's all the same disease. It is a disease of the arteries. It's a hardening of the arteries. There are these plaques which build up in the arteries, and I'm going to talk about heart disease and these things in my handling of the subject degenerative disease scheduled for tomorrow, I think. So we'll leave it at that. But in any case, eat whole grains, vegetables, the things we've been talking about. In other words, the general macrobiotic recommendations. That's just the way to do it. Actually, if people would conscientiously just stay with only these foods, I would say more than half of all problems become not a problem. We solve them just by doing that, but really staying with it, not doing anything else. Then somewhat less than the half of the problems, even with the full macrobiotic program, need some kind of special adjustment to make it work. Then here, how can you help elderly people to deal with the transition to better food, and especially getting rid of the sweet tooth? And also some comments on Alzheimer's disease. So, elder people are more young than younger people. They generally eat simpler foods. They generally eat less. Their expenditure is no longer as much as it was earlier. So they should be thinking about eating the amount that they really feel comfortable with. There's nothing wrong with getting a little thin. People say, oh, mother, you're getting too thin. You have to eat some butter. And this doesn't have to be. It's just totally an optical thing about whether or not you've got a little more fat on you or not. And you'll do better without that excess fat. For getting rid of the sweet tooth, and I had several questions about this. In fact, there were so many questions, I realized that even though we would assume that most people have heard that sugar is not good for you, that obviously taking it from theory into practice is not so easy. Because several people asked, how do I get off of sugar? What can I do to stop eating sugar? And for some people, it's not easy. It really isn't. Some people have to really just work at it. It's a grind. I was blessed with a non-sweet tooth. I found it very easy from one day to the next to drop sugar and not touch it again. And I have not once in the last 22 years voluntarily put sugar in my mouth. But I've discovered I'm quite an exception. Most people voluntarily do it regularly. So what we do about it is we try to realize that we have limits. Everybody has limits. And if we try to pretend we don't have limits, then we'll say, let's go for the optimal now and get rid of all these sweets. I'm too yin. I've been eating too much sweet. So instead of doing that, we'll say, let's get off of it gradually, especially elderly people. Let's eat more sweet things in the form of rice malt, fruit. We'll take as much of these kind of things as is necessary to satisfy our sweet cravings. Some people who go more in the direction of chocolate are not satisfied just with sweet. It has to be sweet and fat. Because otherwise, if they get hungry for chocolate, they would just drink some apple juice or eat an apple. That's very sweet, or eat a plum, and it would be over. But that's not, doesn't do it. It's got to be that gooey fat quality. So if it has to be like that, then you can take a mixture of malt and then put some nut butter in it. It's a real gooey mixture that will remind you of chocolate. And some people tell me, I get such a craving for chocolate, I have to eat it. And I tell them, take rice cakes, put a layer of rice malt, put a layer of almond butter on it, and eat 3 of those, and then tell me if you still are craving chocolate. What happens is people, they say, oh yeah, but nut butter, it's so fat and so clogging, you shouldn't do that. Well, see, we're dealing with an extreme situation here, you know, and extreme situations call sometimes for extreme solutions. So let's do what is necessary and then gradually get off the thick nut butter, and then you can get more into other things. So just be very gentle with yourselves. You know, realize that you have discovered a wonderful secret. That number one, food is very important for health, and number two, which foods are important for health, and that you can decide yourself to a large extent if you're healthy or not. So take your time and make it comfortable and enjoyable. As far as Alzheimer's disease, the best way to deal with that, and sometimes it's very difficult because the degeneration of the brain is already a fact and degenerated brain tissue does not renew. But you can ease it by just giving the person foods which promote central nervous system function, and that is seaweeds and mineral-rich foods. That's what is really good for the central nervous system, minerals. Then, foods for travel. When you're out on the road, well, that's something I know about. That's my specialty. Then it says, how about macrobiotic fast foods when you're in a rush and you have a busy life? Well, that's right. We're actually here coming to one of the major hurdles to eating good food, because we live in a society which is very demanding, where we have lots of things to do, especially when we've found exciting things in our life that we like to involve ourselves with, and we don't want to spend most of our time in the kitchen. So we make compromises. We try to find a certain amount of time for cooking because we realize that's important, or we live in a community where that problem is taken care of. But if we're cooking for ourselves, or if we don't happen to have a wife who loves to cook, then we do have to sometimes get into fast foods, because there will be situations where only that works. And one of the best fast foods is whole grain noodles. They cook up fast. You can make sauces, very quick sauces, and you can find out those recipes from the staff here. They've got some good ideas for sauces. They don't have to take a lot of time. You can always cook things ahead of time. Like grains basically don't really change so much in quality if you leave them for one whole day, or even for 2 days if you're really busy. If you let vegetables stand around a couple days, you'll notice that these definitely do not do well with long standing around. They lack vitality, they're no longer interesting, although you can also eat vegetable leftovers, but not just always cooking them for a couple of days. The vegetables we should cook more fresh, or eating leftovers from the same day, or possibly into the next day if we have to. But we can, without a doubt, cook the protein products like beans, grains, so that it lasts for a couple of days. But we should try to take at least 1 day a week or 2 days a week where we try to cook better, even if that's on the weekend. If we're just eating these fast things all the time, you'll find that your interest in continuing with this diminishes rapidly. You'll start getting attracted to old things that you liked, because attraction to rich foods is a very natural desire. Now, as far as traveling goes, I usually take food with me. This umeboshi plum we talked about is an excellent preservative. If I cook rice and take it with me and the weather is warm, sometimes the rice will already sour the next day. But if I've cooked it with the umeboshi plum, I at least get 1 more day and sometimes 2 more days out of it. And in cooler weather, this rice with umeboshi will keep 4 days. Most of my trips are not for such long-term time, so that's usually enough. But you can do that. Now, you may also want to take along some raw vegetables. They don't go bad as fast as when they've been cooked. So you may have the cooked vegetables for the first part of your trip, and then have some reserves with some fresh vegetables to follow up on. You may want to take bread along. There are lots of ways. Talk to some of the people who travel and get some ideas from them. What I don't do is eat normal food when I travel. I would rather go hungry than eat a normal meal, because I would pay a huge price for it afterwards. But I do sometimes eat in fish restaurants. It is a better alternative, and I find that I often get by better there than I do in a vegetarian restaurant where everything is done with yogurt or cream and you can't get anything without it. and a fish restaurant, what I do take with me always is some form of whole grain. In the restaurant, you can get vegetables, you can get the fish, you can basically have a meal which will satisfy you, but the whole grains, that's what's always missing. So I sometimes will either eat some of the whole grain before I walk in the restaurant if I'm feeling timid and my kidneys are a little weak. Or if I've got full-powered kidneys, I will walk in there, sit down, and actually take a rice ball out of my bag and eat it at the restaurant table. Or maybe you take bread. There's some kinds of bread that keep very well. In Scandinavia, we like to eat rye crisp bread, and that keeps forever. You can always have that as a backup. In Germany, there's very good pumpernickel and any other kind of whole grain breads. That gives you that grain, and that for me is the difference. Now, advice for allergies. And what do you do about allergies to grains or to miso? First of all, allergy to grains to me is a sign of very serious imbalance, because grains are the basis for our human existence. They're the most proper food. And if you're allergic to them, you're really strongly out of balance. Normally, you can regain your ability to eat grains if you do it properly. Number one, we start with buckwheat, because buckwheat is actually not a grain. And with its alkalizing effect, it's excellent for recovering your health with allergies, because allergies usually also have to do with over-acidity. Then we can take millet. Millet has a pretty low allergy reaction, but you may be one of those people who reacts to it, because people can react to any food. Besides buckwheat and millet, rice is the natural grain which causes the least amount of allergy reaction. But again, some people will react to it. What you do is try to find out what grains do you tolerate and which ones don't you. Now, what I have found is that practically everybody who has a food allergy has some mineral deficiency. It's usually either zinc or magnesium. But I will recommend that people get a very thorough blood test. It's called the red blood cell blood test. It goes beyond what you can discover with the normal serum test. And this test will often show such a case. I recently experienced a woman who could only eat 3 foods. I think it was buckwheat, carrots, and lentils, if I remember right. Anyway, that's all she could eat. So she had to eat that 3 times a day. She'd been going to doctors. No one could discover why it was. I told her, if you now are doing this for so long, there's only one possible explanation. You have got some mineral deficiencies. She got this blood test done, and it showed for the magnesium, it wasn't even represented on the chart. It was like she didn't even have any in her body. She was so happy and so elated when she discovered what was the cause of all this suffering. She took magnesium supplements, and within a short time, she had overcome her food allergies. If you think about magnesium for a second, magnesium is the key to over 300 basic immune processes in your body. And if your magnesium is low, and I see a lot of red blood cell tests, and there are a lot of people who are low, magnesium is one of the common ones that's low. That's why seaweeds are so good. Seaweeds give you magnesium, and they'll help you overcome that. But this woman, she reacted to seaweeds. She needed to just take magnesium in its pure form until she got it up to a level where her body came back into balance. This is all very complicated. For instance, magnesium is the key for us being able to use B vitamins. So if your magnesium is out, you will have a difficulty making use of all the B vitamins that you may be taking in the food. And this will cause all kinds of problems. And it's so complicated that nobody really has an overview of what's going on. Nobody. No doctors, nobody. It's just too complicated. We're still learning. So if you do have those kind of allergies and they don't get better, find out about your blood composition. You may need some mineral or vitamin therapy. If you find yourself reacting to miso, you might have yourself checked for candida. People who react to miso sometimes are suffering from the candida intestinal fungus. Then sleeping disorders. Waking up after 5 hours and feeling tired. Always waking up at 4 or 5 in the morning. There's a couple of things that can be happening here. It's generally a sign of being too young. When we're yin, we relax. And when we're yang, we don't. So, sleeping through the night is a sign of having balanced yin energy. And waking up in the middle of the night and not going back to sleep is too young. This can have a couple of aspects. Number one, you can be using your head too much, making your thoughts too young. At the time I wrote my book, I got involved in an intense work schedule like I've never had in my life, and for the first time in my life, I found myself also waking up at 4 or 5 in the morning and realized that I had to get some good yin into my schedule if I was going to continue, although I got some of my real inspirations for some of the chapters there sitting around the house at 4 in the morning. And the other thing is that you may be lacking physical exercise. The way a natural lifestyle works is daily your body is moving and doing things. Now in our modern society, people are moving less and less. But daytime is active time, and it's physical activity time. The nighttime is passive time and lying. Now if your daytime activity is too yin, that means you're sitting too much, you're not moving your body, then this may make your night too yang. So it can also come from that part. Now what do you do about it? One very good thing is, aside from these things I've talked about, finding out how to get less stress, more balance, is like taking a walk in the fresh air in the evening. This will relax you. It gives you a nice exercise, a good physical exercise without the strong stimulation of heavy exercise, and also soaking your feet in warm water or in ginger water. You use the same water you would use for a ginger compress, or you might try a ginger compress on your kidneys. The kidneys, as well as the liver, can be behind problems of sleeping disorders. So then, how do we deal with menopause? And suggestions for prolonging the onset of menopause for those who want to have children later on. So dealing with menopause, first of all, women are yin. Estrogens are yin. When a woman reaches menopause age, her female area becomes more yang. The shutting down of estrogen production is more yang. The estrogen is what gives her female quality. So as the estrogens shut down, we would say she becomes more and more yang. Now, if she likes to eat a lot of heavy calorie-rich foods, which create heat, calorie foods are heat-producing, animal food, then she may get these attacks of extreme heat, where she's suddenly sweating and peeling off that sweater because it suddenly gets too hot. It's excess. We could look at the triple heater in acupuncture again. We talked about that as a heat conductor in the body, if we're into that part of natural healing. But especially for everybody, what we should do is think about what produces heat in the body and what cools off. So very nice are things like cucumbers, very nice, balanced, yin, cooling food. Taking cucumbers, pressed cucumbers with a little bit of rice vinegar, very soft, cooling yin foods. But above all, don't take cheese and eggs and these foods that are very heat producing, because the body now is yangizing and it can no longer adequately deal with this yang excess. So the best way to go about menopause in a graceful way is to try to become more yin, because your condition is becoming more yang. So be careful with the salt, be careful with the hard baked things. And if you want to prolong it, you would eat heavier, fatty foods. You see, the more fat a woman has in her body, the more likely her body will continue producing estrogens. So she shouldn't eat a very restricted kind of diet where she loses the body fat. Now, there's different kinds of body fat. We've seen some of the examples. We're talking here about a nice thin layer of fat that just gives the skin a nice tone, but not the hard, compacted fat. But not eating too narrow, because the wider diet, richer foods, things like mochi and oats. Oats are excellent. Oats are about 7% oil. So they're good. So go that way with it. And also, don't take here strong yang foods, because they will work against the female energy. So think about taking your richness in the form of lighter things. As I said before, mochi is very good. Just as one example. Excess facial hair. What should you do about that? That's a difficult problem. I assume this is a woman. Men just shave it off. It's not so easy to deal with, because it's a discharge kind of thing, and some women even will experience more facial hair coming out after they change over to healthy foods, because the strong yang that was inside starts coming out. But usually it comes out and then goes away again. It's just a discharge. So the way we deal with it is to stay away from these heavy yang animal foods. That's what gives the facial hair. In traditional Japan, it was considered like a disgrace for a woman to have facial hair, because it was a sign she was not in harmony with her basic femininity. And then hair loss and baldness, this can be different. There are different kinds of hair loss. It's usually related to food, related to different imbalances, and you just have to experiment and see which one have you got. One of them is what we call yin. If we think of a hair sitting in the follicle, and this is firm, and then because of excess yin, which makes things loose, the hair gradually drops out. It's no longer firm. That's what we call yin hair loss. It can also be caused by yang. There can be a hard layer of fat which gradually constricts the blood flow and stops the flow of blood to the hair follicle, creating an undernourished condition, and the hair follicle dies. In fact, this phenomenon of fat accumulating in the blood vessels and blocking off is the main sickness of today. For several years, people thought that sexual impotence was a psychological problem, and years have been spent and lots of money wasted in doing a lot of psychotherapy with men for this thing. About 2 years ago, it was discovered that this is a physiological problem. The most common cause of impotence in men is clogged blood vessels to the sexual area. And if these blood vessels get clogged, that's it. So, people get hard of hearing. They found out hard of hearing, very often, the blood vessels to the ears get clogged with saturated fat and cholesterol, and the ear function recedes. Again and again, the same problem when we look at the very basic cause. So this is the same with hair loss. How do we deal with migraine headaches? First of all, we pay attention to what medical science has discovered. There are certain foods which have been proven beyond a doubt to be migraine causers. Number 1, chocolate. Number 2, red wine or red grape juice. It's an amino acid in the skin of the red grape. Now, if you take a small amount, that's of no importance. But if you like to drink wine in great quantities, as some people do, together with cheese, the next cause, then you're in trouble. So cheese has been proven to also be a migraine causer. It's not in the milk itself, but it's from the process of making cheese. Another one is oranges. Oranges are a major cause of migraines. And the other one is, let me think, there's one more. Oh, it's coffee. It's coffee. Now, what these things have in common, except for the cheese on the surface, is that they're strong yin foods. But it's a substance in the cheese through the cheese-making process which causes this, not the cheese itself. But migraine is a condition of expanded brain cells. It's a short-circuiting of the nervous system. From a macrobiotic point of view, migraine is a pre-epileptic condition. Epilepsy is a very similar mechanism. It's too yin. You want to be careful not to drink too much liquid. You can also drink too little liquid, but drink moderately with liquid, because excess liquid will make your brain cells expand. We don't want those to expand. So, I have a very close example of that. My mother, for as long as I can remember, suffered regularly from migraine headaches. And when she went over to macrobiotic food in 1978, she had her last migraine. However, it didn't come just from one day to the other, because she still liked coffee. So she did macrobiotics with coffee, and the migraines became less. And unfortunately, she had to stop totally with coffee before they stopped totally. So here's an interesting question about macrobiotics reversing the terms of yin and yang from the traditional meanings of the Yellow Emperor's Classic. If you read the Yellow Emperor's Classic, you'll find some confusion about the use of yin and yang. It's quite a long subject, so I'll just shortly address it. The two systems of yin and yang for macrobiotics and the Yellow Emperor's Classic, both are valid. It depends on your perspective. We can say that the macrobiotic perspective is more on a, say, a more limited or focused kind of thing, the way analytical Western people think. Osawa, who introduced macrobiotics to the West, made a conscious decision to change these ideas around. And some people, because of that, prefer just to always use the words contraction and expansion, because then we know what we're talking about. So you don't even have to use the words yin and yang, but it's quite a mouthful with contraction and expansion, so that just for expediency, it's easier to say yin and yang. If you would like to read a very excellent book about macrobiotics, which is perhaps the best book out in English, it is by Anne-Marie Kolben, a Dutch woman who has lived for many years in the U.S. In New York, she has the Natural Foods Gourmet Cooking School, and her book is called Food and Healing. And she dedicates her book to George Osawa, the man who introduced macrobiotics to the West. But you'll find in her book a very refreshing perspective. She recommends people eating strict macrobiotic food to relax a little bit and don't take it too seriously. But especially, she gives good macrobiotic recommendations. She does not talk about yin and yang. She stays with the concepts contraction and expansion so that she can get around this problem. Because what happens is people will laugh at macrobiotics and say, we don't know what we're talking about, because you've read the original Chinese texts and seen that these are used in a different way. But the Chinese perspective is a little more metaphysical. Okay. Why has macrobiotics basically ignored traditional Oriental use of herbs and herbal formulas for balancing the body? Okay, I mentioned this in the context of another question a little bit. There was a naive attitude in the beginning of macrobiotic activities in this country that food was all we need. And now we know that that's not true. Food is our basis. I called it the base camp before And we use that to go out then and experiment and explore and find out what else functions for us. The only problem is when we try to just rely on those things. So we get problems, so let's take Chinese herbs. Actually, in old China, what people did was this. When they got health problems, the first thing they did was change their food, or try to change it around. If that didn't work, then they went on to herbs. If that didn't work, they got into acupuncture and moxa. And today they do it the other way around. You get a problem, you start out with acupuncture. Well, that usually will not give you any kind of long-term success because the basic imbalances will keep coming back if you're eating the wrong foods. And then when that doesn't seem to be really doing it, then you might be interested in getting into some food changes. So, if you've been a sugar addict for 40 years, how long will it take to get its effects out of the body? Does it produce permanent damage? Sugar does in fact produce a lot of damage, but the permanent damage can be kept to a reasonable minimum so that you don't have to suffer loss of life quality because of it. Someone who has been addicted to sugar that long, in any case, understands that it was a problem, and apparently it looks like the problem's over now because now the question is just how do you get rid of its effects? And it's not so much how do you get off the sugar. We talked about that. How you get rid of its effects is try to eat mineral-rich foods because the sugar depleted your minerals. Sugar is one of the causes of osteoporosis. So, let's get rid of those products which deplete minerals and instead take those that give minerals. Seaweeds, leafy greens, especially the ones that taste slightly bitter. The people that have access to greens like collard greens, those are very good. So, other things you can do are to eat tekka, T-E-K-K-A, tekka, which is a very yang condiment made out of burdock roots, very yang, miso, very yang, and it's so strong tasting that we usually take just a small amount, maybe a third of a teaspoon or something. You don't need a lot of that. But it has a good balancing effect, and if you don't like the taste of it, put it in your miso soup and you'll not notice it. Or put it in some tea. It's very good for a first aid help. Someone who is returning from a bout with sugar and needs some fast action, then you can use tekka very well. The other one that balances it well is the umeboshi plum, the salt plum. Recently I was then asked when I spoke about the neutralizing effects it had, somebody said, how much sugar will one umeboshi plum neutralize? Person's already starting to figure it out. So here's a very common problem, constipation. What do you do about that? So, this person has had 1.5 feet, 18 inches of the colon removed, and now has problems with elimination. What would be good? The colon, which is another word for the large intestine, is, in this case, of course, crippled, and it may not be possible to really get an optimal elimination going again. But in any case, using certain foods will help that. What is always important is to see who is this person. Do they have more yang or yin condition in the intestines? Often, there'll be excesses of both, but we can say in general that something like agar, which is a gelatin, is very good taken with cooked fruit, especially cooked dried fruits. We find Hunza apricots. Do you have those in America, Hunza apricots? They're wild apricots that come from the east. They're sold with the pit still in it. They're excellent. And that's one symptomatic thing you can do. Another is just a lot of massage of the belly, especially when you wake up in the morning. Draw your knees up. So you totally relax the abdomen, and then do clockwise massage of the intestinal area. It may need a little bit of stimulation from the outside. If you know certain yoga techniques, you can also use yoga, and you can use acupressure, working with different meridians. We have a point that is very important on the intestine meridian. Large intestine meridian is right here. Large intestine point 4. Okay, it's right here. You find it easily by just bringing your thumb against the skin, the webbing here, and then just let the thumb roll in, and when you get to the point, you'll be on large intestine point number 4. This is one of the 2 most important acupuncture points in the body for general tonifying, general treatments, without knowing too much about it. The other one which might help is stomach point number 36, which is down below the kneecap on the outside. You can look up on an acupuncture chart that those 2 can help. There's other ones too. These are just a couple of quick things that are general. In any case, chew your food very well, because the more you chew, the less the colon has to do. All the food processes in the digestive tract, these food breaking down processes, are very much helped by good chewing. But really good foods would be just high fiber foods. The quickest way to get constipation is to eat fiber-free or fiber-poor foods. So macrobiotic food is very high in fiber, but it has to be chewed well. So next question is, person with a ruptured spleen, which was surgically removed, asks what can be done to boost the immune system. Does it put a greater stress on the pancreas since they share the same meridian? So the answer to the first part of the question is, what the person can do with a ruptured spleen is to eat very, very, very well. We should all eat well, but we all like to go crazy now and then and maybe eat things that are not quite optimal for our health. That's all part of the joy of life, is doing it and then especially experiencing what it does to us afterwards. Learning from that. But people who have a removed spleen, they no longer have the body cleansing ability that they had before, so they will retain the problems of this more chaotic things we might do now and then than other people. So it is a weakness of your soil, earth energy, and it is more stress on the pancreas, but you can still live very reasonably if you just take care of yourself. And of course, the things that support spleen pancreas energy are the sweet vegetables. So what is the truth regarding Westerners being unable to digest soy protein due to a lack of an enzyme? I suspect this is a rumor being spread by the meat industry. I have had no trouble digesting soy protein for the last 2 decades. I think that when we look at the subject of protein, we can demystify it by understanding that protein is basically nothing more than a collection of amino acids. That's all it is. Now, which amino acids are present in soy beans which Westerners can't digest? I can't imagine us not being able to digest them. Soy protein is actually our hope for the future. As I said before, there's no future with animal protein as our major protein source. It's becoming more and more clear every year, and soy protein is our hope that in the future that we can somehow manage with these increasing ecological and population problems. Are there any food combining principles to consider, such as not mixing grain and meat at the same time? Yeah, that's a good idea. Don't mix grain and meat. In fact, don't eat meat. So, in fact, there are some. Macrobiotics in general does not address the subject of food combining. I have found that, in general, people have smoother digestion and less digestive problems when they eat fruits separate from the rest of the foods. It has to do with the way the digestive processes happen. Some of you may have read Harvey Diamond's book, Fit for Life. One of Harvey Diamond's major points is food combining, and he's right about the fruit part. I have found in the clinic, we have patients coming in, eating our food, and we serve a dessert every day at lunch. And when I arrive at the clinic, which I only visit them once every 5 or 6 weeks, I stay a week, and so some people have been already a month at this, and they tell me, I like this food, but I just have gas, intestinal gas all the time. And the two major causes are that they eat their dessert right after the meal, meaning the fruit now will totally throw a monkey wrench into the digestion of the carbohydrates in the grains and vegetables, leaving it more to ferment rather than to digest. And the other is that they don't chew well. But I find that very quickly people get rid of their intestinal gas when they leave their dessert at least an hour or maybe 2 hours after lunch, not just, like that was the food and now there's the dessert, but rather a little bit of pause in between. In our center in Sweden, we serve dessert about an hour after the meal, the major meal. We serve a dessert every day because we find that most of them are not far enough along in their development to really be without sweet things. That if we don't give them a dessert, we find them rummaging through our kitchen cupboards. So how about low iron problems that don't seem to be getting better, especially for pregnancy? So this is, again, a classic example of what do you do when things aren't working. First of all, you try with the things you know about. So you read in the Macrobiotic Book of Home Remedies, maybe. There are some excellent suggestions. What do you do about low iron? Just check the Macrobiotic Book of Home Remedies, written by a macrobiotic doctor, Van Kouwenberg from Belgium. And you'll find there are several things. It recommends taking Teca. It recommends eating a couple of sheets of nori seaweed every day. Recommends taking bancha tea with a little shot of soy sauce in it. But sometimes people do all these things and it still is a problem. Then it may be time for some iron supplements, especially during pregnancy, because that's a very special time. And sometimes it's not so bad seen from a medical point of view. I've talked to doctors who say that a light case of anemia is more the rule than the exception in pregnancy. But sometimes it's used as a way of really hammering on the pregnant woman that now you have to be reasonable and get off of this macrobiotic diet. It's interesting how important it is for conventional doctors to get people off of healthy diets. I have to really just, I'm just astonished again and again at how much effort they put into this. But what I do is recommend that they take a good organic iron supplement, because in a very short time they feel much better. But we should be sure we need it. You know, iron is one of those things necessary for cell division. And people who are tending towards cancer, if they were to take iron supplements without needing them, they might be promoting their cancer. But if we know that the iron level is low, then it's wise not to wait around too long in pregnancy. With other ones, we can take our time maybe. But the immune system is depressed when iron is low, exactly as the immune system is depressed if magnesium or zinc is low. So we may have to take supplements. Now, as I said previously, I have found that one certain one, which is called Megafood, what they call blood builder, that one I've had good success with. But I'm sure there are other good ones. You just check it out and see what works. The normal conventional ones that the doctor will routinely prescribe don't seem to work as well as these organic ones. So what can we do to boost the immune system? Number one is don't eat the things that suppress the immune system. That's only logical. Number two is live a lifestyle that doesn't suppress the immune system. If you go on 4 hours of sleep every day, your immune system is depressed. If you don't move your feet much, if you sit all day, your immune system will get depressed. So you have to think of all the things that affect the immune system, not just food, everything. The immune system is also going to be a topic I take up in further discussions, so I will just quickly say avoid the things that bother it, that stop it, and take the things that support it, and that is especially vitamin and mineral-rich foods, because the immune system is dependent on these nutrients. What foods depress the thyroid? A thyroid low function I have found to be very rare in my macrobiotic experience. When it happens, there's a couple of possibilities. Number one, the people are not eating enough seaweed. We have more problem with hyper than hypo. In other words, the overactive thyroid is more often a problem because some people are sensitive to the iodine in seaweeds. And they will take the seaweeds, as we recommend, and they'll find themselves getting into a hyperactive condition if they take too much. Now, I have been taking these seaweeds for many years, and I feel fine with them. But if you get a depressed thyroid, I would, in any case, increase the seaweeds. If you tend to overproduction or hyper condition, then still take them, but in general, some people may need to stop them, but you will take them in very moderate quantities. Be careful not too much. So take more seaweeds. Now, other things that can suppress thyroid activity is taking a lot of tofu and soybean products. So if you like to eat a lot of tofu, this can become a problem. Some people like it so much they eat it almost every day, especially people in the general vegetarian direction. With macrobiotics, we think about yin and yang. We know that tofu is very yin, so we're careful not to get too yang. Or not too yin, but to push it towards yang. That's what I wanted to say. So we will not eat tofu every day. People that are eating general vegetarian don't care about yin and yang. They just care about having vegetable quality food that tastes good. So they maybe will get into those problems because they eat sometimes too much soy products. Other things that can do it are things from the cabbage family. If you overeat things from the cabbage family. Overeat means just, that's your main food. It can happen. But if you sometimes don't have access to other organic vegetables, and you do tend to eat a lot of those, then just be sure to increase your consumption of seaweeds until you find a good balance. What can be done about herpes simplex virus? Is there any hope with the macrobiotic diet? Yes, there is. Herpes is a sign of acidic blood, well, let's say acidic body fluid. Acidic blood is not really proper expression. The blood tends towards acidity, but the body stops that through several mechanisms. So acidic body fluids will promote that. I have seen many people have a total remission of all herpes symptoms, and they get no more until they go on a holiday and start eating in restaurants. And then it comes back. Or they get stressed. When you get stressed, your body produces certain hormones which will bring the immune system out of balance. You can do something about it, but you have to have clarity in your purpose. The virus is very yin and doesn't like yang. If you have herpes, you may consider getting also this red blood cell test, or in some way having a deeper check of your blood quality, because your immune system may be suppressed in other ways. So again, the seaweeds. I keep coming back to seaweeds because they are very important and they're also very unique. There's no other system of diet that is recommended that places so much importance on seaweeds as the macrobiotic way. How can you stimulate digestion? Well, let's say one thing first. How can you stimulate appetite? One good way is to make it light in the beginning. If you don't have appetite, it's usually too yang. So take something lightly yin before. What I find works very well are cucumbers pressed with umeboshi. You can take the salt plum paste with cukes, just press them for an hour or two, and eat this before the meal. And it works wonders for making appetite. How do you stimulate digestion? We stimulate it by using fermented foods. So, sauerkraut, miso soup, umeboshi plums, kvass, or bread drink, which is very easy to make yourself. Comes originally from Eastern Europe, and we serve it every morning at breakfast in our center. Some people find that this bread drink stimulates their digestion a little too much. They tend to get diarrhea if they drink a whole glass of it. So they'll be careful of that. But coming back to the subject of constipation, this kvass, K-W-A-S-S, or bread drink as it's called in English, fermented bread. You take sourdough bread that's kind of old, no one wants to eat now, you let it just stand there, dry, and it's just cooked up shortly. And then you take a little bit of sauerkraut juice, or if you have already made some kvass, you take a little of the original juice and let it ferment. You need some raisins or something that contains sugar so it will ferment. Let it stand for some days and you've got it. If you want to get the details of this, then talk to the people in the kitchen, because this recipe is in our book in German, and the kitchen staff has already received the book. So how about B12 and folic acid? This is a big subject. One of the reasons why we recommend fish is because we have experience that people will develop over the long run. Some people, not all people, some people will tend to develop B12 problems, which can be shown with a blood test, an enlarging of the blood cells, showing that it's happening. And B12 is only in certain products. It's in meat, it's in fish, there's a little bit in eggs, but it's not in all fish. It's in salmon and mackerel and herring. So B12 is not something you have to take every day. Like, have you had your salmon today? Your B12? You don't have to worry about that. It's something that is stored in the body. Studies have shown that people can eat up to 30 years totally vegetarian food and have no B12 deficiencies. There are also some vegetarian qualities of B12, but there's a lot of controversy about the subject of B12. Lots of controversy. Neither laymen nor experts really understand this subject. And that's why we recommend that people take these kinds of fish just now and then if they're uncertain about it. This doesn't mean you have to take it as of today. For health purposes, let's say someone who has endometriosis or some other kind of problem that requires radical reduction of protein, especially animal protein. You could do fine with going for 3 up to 6 months. It's no problem. Most people have a reserve of B12 that will last them for at least a year or two, and I would say on average 2 to 3 years is common. Many people go much longer. It is something to consider if you think about eating vegetarian-style macrobiotic food, in other words, nothing from animal sources, only vegetable quality food. After about a year and a half or 2 years at the latest, I would just get a routine blood check, have a doctor check your blood for B12. You'll know very quickly what's happening. You may want to do it even earlier. But I myself have never had a B12 check done. But the Swedish health authorities came to our house and checked out all of the adult members of our macrobiotic center because we asked them if they would do it. It was cheaper than if we paid for it. We said, this, is we're interested. We're experimenting with food and we'd like to know it. Well, they were very interested to find out if that was true. So they came from Gothenburg and they checked out, and out of 16 adults, 15 had perfectly fine B12 levels. One woman who had a chronic kidney inflammation and was eating a very low protein diet had a B12 deficiency. However, this woman succeeded in avoiding dialysis. The doctors told her that she had 2 more months until she would be a dialysis patient, that her kidneys were so bad that she just had to go over the threshold and that was it. She reversed that process and is today living a healthy, normal life. So for her, it was better to take, as it turned out, to take a B12 supplement than to start eating fish to get the B12. So we can see there's no simple answers to anything. We can't say fish is always better because it's natural and the other things are supplements. As far as folic acid goes, those deficiencies are best taken care of by getting a variety of good organic vegetables. This can be a problem sometimes. Vegetables are, I think, our best source of folic acid, and if deficiencies are coming, we should make some effort to increase the quality and the variety of the vegetables we're eating. It's normally not a problem. I have seen people who have had very marginal folic acid levels, and they pick up when they eat macrobiotically. I've seen one man recover from a cancer where he had low folic acid in the beginning, and they told him in any case he must be very careful to take lots of folic acid. He did it without any supplements, and it came into balance. But in Germany, there is a lot of interest in organic farming, and in the big cities of Germany, you have a very good access to a whole variety of good, vibrant vegetables done with the so-called biodynamic method. So, we've talked about a lot of things here, and I have lots more questions, but I see that our time is running out. So, we'll end this session and continue later. Thank you. It's been a very interesting experience here with all these people, all these very interested people who have come to learn about health evaluation through macrobiotic techniques. We've been talking a lot about organ weakness, and we've been talking a lot about what you can do about it. And I think it's a very good idea that I read you the following, because when people come to me for counseling, I usually ask them to sign a statement in which they understand that what we do is not a replacement for the normal medical treatment or diagnosis. And we understand why. The world is full of quackery, and anybody can claim anything. With macrobiotics, our major principle is non credo, which means don't believe, but rather experience. You know, like make everything a part of your own experience. Don't believe things from outside without really getting directly involved in it. So what I've been doing here the last sessions has been to give you an encounter with a way to playfully, hopefully, understand more about how you can maintain health, and if you have health problems, to better understand the context. But we should, of course, never forget that what we're doing here is a general appraisal, and I said in the first session that it is never 100% sure, and especially when you're beginning, it's not 100% sure, but rather that we're using these things to just learn. It's a learning experience, it's an educational experience, and it is not a replacement for medical therapy. So that we have no misunderstandings, especially for the video, which is being done now, so that those who come after and maybe have not had the spirit of this, the good laughter and everything going on here, people understanding that we're having fun here and that we're not pretending to be medical professionals, that I read the following so that anyone who would look at the film of this seminar would not have any misunderstandings about what we've been doing. So, this is what I'm going to read to you. This is regarding medical diagnosis and the practice of medicine without a license. At various times during this seminar, I have been discussing diagnostic techniques based on macrobiotic principles. However, I must give you a warning. If a person who is not a licensed medical professional makes a diagnosis of someone else's physical condition, he or she could be engaging in an illegal practice. The skills you have learned in this seminar are for the improvement and maintenance of your own health, and perhaps to help your friends and loved ones to improve and maintain their health. If you perceive that another person's physical condition or dietary practices may be seriously unhealthful, you should be sure to recommend that before making any major dietary or lifestyle changes, he or she consult with a licensed medical professional, either a dietitian or a medical doctor as appropriate. This is especially true when speaking with a pregnant woman or a person with a known medical problem. The point is, this seminar is not intended for you to try to take the place of medical professionals. So that's just good common sense, and if we keep that in mind, then we have understood the spirit of what I've been doing here in the last days. I'm very grateful to the medical professionals who have inspired me to learn more about the workings of the body, and I would never suggest that people ignore medical practice, that they can replace that, but rather we should be learning more about our bodies and being able to help ourselves be healthier. Now, many of you have been very good at assessing yin and yang here. We've had people come up. I've been hearing a lot of the right answers with, are the people yin or are they yang? And I know that you have learned a lot this weekend. Maybe some of you already knew these things before, but there are fortunately also a lot of new people here, which is very inspiring to see how the enthusiasm of these participants also has contributed to this fine atmosphere. So we'll go right into these last questions. It says, you spoke earlier about the study regarding the addition of vitamin D to milk, which then resulted in detrimental amounts of calcium being absorbed. Do you believe there is evidence to support the corollary that excessive amounts of vitamin D through one's diet or supplements also would cause the excessive detrimental absorption of calcium? If so, what are the maximum levels of vitamin D and calcium you recommend to take via supplements? Well, this, thinking about our disclaimer, which we just presented, is a very good situation for just that. This is a very technical question. Each person's requirements are different. Anyone who is getting into it this technique, I would say let's talk to a dietitian who has more interest than just, say, the normal dietary recommendations, because the subject of nutrition has taken great leaps forward in the last years, and many people who have an education in this field are a little behind the times. So I would look for the proper people who are open to the latest developments and are moving with the flow. I would also talk to a health professional, like a doctor, about these kind of things. I do think it is possible to get excessive amounts of vitamin D, but normally not through the diet. There aren't that many vitamin D sources. And actually, where do we get most of our vitamin D? From the sun, that's right. Our body synthesizes it. So we get it. Some people feel a little bad after spending a day out in the sun. This has different reasons. Number one is the person may actually be developing a vitamin D toxicity. Vitamin D is fat soluble, so your body does not discharge it easily. So you can, in fact, get into trouble taking vitamin D supplements, and you should only take them under the direction of a health professional. Because taking vitamins or minerals without really needing them is a quick way to get into trouble. So you should, be very careful with taking those and not just play around with them. That's why I recommend people to go to doctors and get red blood cell tests, because then they know what's low and what's not. The problem is we have too few doctors today who have that kind of skill. Is there a problem using miso as a spread on bread? Now there's something you can handle without being a health professional. What do you think about that? First of all, miso is very young, it's very salty. Now, if you spread that on bread, something which is also very young, baked flour, you have something that is very, very young and will probably make you crave strong yin. Now, I was back in, say, the first American generation of macrobiotics. These were introduced by Orientals, mainly Japanese people coming to this country. And the late 60s, early 70s, we started, and that was one of our favorites. Was putting miso on bread. I can still remember doing that, and I can still remember the extreme yin cravings I got when I did it. Later on, as my understanding of yin and yang increased, I realized that miso, as a very concentrated, salty substance, is best used as a seasoning in soups and vegetable dishes. And if you want to use it as a spread, take just a very little bit as a seasoner and mix it with other things to make a tasty spread, but don't spread it on bread. Okay. Can we discuss anxiety and what organ is it related to? Well, if you think about what I said today, which organ is anxiety? Kidneys. Anxiety is a kind of fear. It's like an undetermined fear. We can be afraid of heights. That's a very clear fear. Or we can be a little anxious, just generally uneasy. But again, it is the feeling of not being in control of your life, not being able to react, respond to the changes coming about. Can you suggest how to use seasoning in macrobiotic cooking to replace strong peppers and spices for someone who likes to eat strong spiced foods? Well, we have also some strong spices which don't have the long-lasting yin effect of others. For example, horseradish. Horseradish is a root. It's very spicy, but the root gives it a more yang quality, and it's very balanced, spicy, and you can feel it in your sinus cavities. And we sometimes, when we want to get a little exotic, we even get some wasabi, W-A-S-A-B-I, which is a Japanese kind of horseradish. Very delicious for those who like hot things. It can even make your eyes water. Then we use ginger. Ginger is a very strong spice. And I hope that you're able to get some cooking instruction, because those kind of questions are very important. They're the things that make you more likely to want to continue. So, what about vaccinations of children? Now, this is quite a subject. We have some friends in this community, let's say this extended community, who are very much aware of the pros and cons of vaccinations. If you'd like to find out about that, I would suggest talking to these people. They are some friends who have come here from Sweden, and you can find out about them. They are involved in some natural, we can say therapies or natural means of balancing health. And they have some very valuable information on the pros and cons of this. There is no easy answer, but we know that vaccinations are something which do have a backside. The decision which my wife and I have taken is that our children will not be vaccinated. And with our 3 daughters, We have had no vaccinations, and it goes fine. Our children enjoy eating macrobiotic food, and they voluntarily don't eat sugar. They have stronger blood quality. I don't know what I would recommend someone who has a child who refuses to eat good food, insists on eating fast food, junk food, insists on weakening the immune system. But I would tell you to check into it. In any case, look at the side effects. There are some vaccinations today which are against problems which are so rare that there are more often negative reactions to the vaccine than there are people actually getting the disease. Here again, this would be an excellent topic for a health professional who has a more open attitude to the alternative ideas going around today. Talk to the alternative physicians about what they say about this. They have experience in that. It says, could you tell about what to do when you're still having the same headache after 20 years because of a collision? Again, these kind of things are very deep things. When you have a constant headache for 20 years, there are going to be no easy answers, you can be sure. But I would say this is one of the most important things I would like to communicate to you in this course here. That is that you develop the spirit of experimenting. Experiment. That's what I've been doing. I experimented with eating only raw fruits for a couple of days. I found that I could feel every filling in my mouth. I did that in the summer when it wouldn't throw me so far out of balance. I read George Osawa's book where he said, eat a lot of fruit and then count the hairs on your pillow the next morning. And then don't eat fruit and count the hairs on your pillowcase then. I found this fascinating to experiment, so I did it. One day I ate a lot of fruit, and I thought, incredible, this man has caught sight of one of the fantastic secrets of this earth, that food has a very strong energetic effect on you. Because if you eat a lot of fruit, your hair will get looser and it'll fall out. I found I had about 5 to 8 times as many hairs on the pillow the couple of times I tried that. I didn't count them exactly, I kind of estimated. But I was experimenting. So if you have a problem like long-time headaches, first of all, always steer to the middle. That's what we're basically saying. Just eat good food. You're supporting your immune system. All medical studies today, or let's say the majority of medical studies today, are supporting most of the things I've said here. They don't deal with yin and yang, of course. But when it comes to the analytical approach to what is proper food for human health, read what the National Academy of Science says. Read what the McGovern Committee of the U.S. Senate said. You'll find that macrobiotic recommendations are always right up there. It's what is recommended as proper food, because we know that this is good for us. So let's just steer to that and then do our experiments. We can do the experiment in the form of yin and yang. Spend 1 week maybe working more with the yang side. If I had headaches like that, I would think nerve cells and nerve threads through the body will become more sensitive when they become more yin. So they become more painful. So by contracting and being denser, they're less sensitive. So my first impulse would be, let's try the yang experiment first. Let's cut out the strong yin and see what that does. If that doesn't do it, let's try yin. Maybe we got it all turned around. So this is for any kind of problem. What about osteoporosis? Well, I've mentioned that a little bit, but very quickly I'm going to tell you what medical research has shown. Number one cause of osteoporosis is protein excess. There is not one medical research study which has been able to prove that dairy food stops osteoporosis. It is superstition, and it is still being spoken about as the way to stop it. Among experts today, there is no serious disagreement. They know protein excess is the #1 cause of decalcification of the bones. #2, sugar. And then staying away from the products which block calcium absorption. You know what those are? They're hopefully things which you don't take much. #1 is nicotine. It blocks calcium absorption. #2, alcohol. #3, caffeine. So we can imagine now this incredibly hilarious situation where a woman is wearing an estrogen plaster. Estrogen therapy is what they give women with osteoporosis. And in one hand, she has a cup of coffee or a martini. In the other hand, she has a cigarette, and she's trying to do something about her osteoporosis. It's a bad joke. So if you want to do something about it, eat good food. There are population groups around the world who eat no dairy food and do not know osteoporosis. Several. They're in Africa and Asia, South America. They're like native peoples, not the modern industrialized society. They're more what we call primitive people, but a very advanced form of being primitive. So, and here it says, how about eating avocado sometimes? Now there's a subject I can handle again. Avocado is very yin. It is one of the few sources of saturated fat in vegetable quality food. There's just a couple of others, like coconuts. But some people are attracted to those. And if you eat avocados, it's a pretty small thing. If you read a macrobiotic book, it will recommend you don't eat avocados because they're very yin. They're not as yin as nightshades, and they're not as yin as sugar. And if you're eating a pretty good regimen and you enjoy that, that's that 5% of getting carried away. That's so much fun. So, let yourself get carried away and get into it and enjoy the avocado. No guilt feelings. No feelings of maybe you're getting too yin, because we have the wonderful compass of yin and yang. And if I eat an avocado and think that made me too yin, and with time you get a feeling for that. How do you feel when you're too yin? How do you feel when you're too yang? You get a feeling, and if you feel you've gone out too far in one way, you just go back the other way. So it's not a scientific thing. It's an intuitive kind of thing. So you work with that. And macrobiotics, in the end, is nothing more than an attempt to reestablish our connection to our source, which means intuition. Intuitive power is reconnecting with our origin. And macrobiotics is one of the techniques we use to do it. It is a more physically oriented way. People who rely only on physical orientation to find balance in life are usually disappointed. So what we do is we combine macrobiotics as a physical, food-oriented, lifestyle-oriented program to bring ourselves into balance, and then we go out in life and we do what we want to do with it. What I've been talking about these last days in these sessions is, I would say, probably 5% of what macrobiotics is. But it's the most important 5% because it gives us the biological basis. And what the real macrobiotic adventure is what you do with your health. And that means you go out of this basis and you get into life and you do those things. You maybe get involved in spiritual development, in developing your more intuitive side. That's optimal personal growth, using both. And what's very wonderful is that the healthier you get, the faster you can accelerate also your spiritual development. Some people are just gifted and have a natural ability to take on burdens at the physical level and still have a lot of energy that will really send them into new dimensions of consciousness through meditation, through chanting, as has been done for ages in the East and also in the West. But the most important thing is that we find out what will work for the average person. That's what's wonderful, that we don't have to be these very special people. We can just be the average people, and we can use these techniques to actually attain heights which in earlier times only the really special people were able to attain. So that's what I've been trying to communicate to you these last few days, and my feeling has been that you have understood what I've said. And I very much appreciate the interest and the attention you've given me. I have thoroughly enjoyed myself, and even though it's been several hours here and I took time off from my holidays to come here, I am very happy that I did take the decision to come here and to cut my holidays a little shorter, because actually what I do is a bit always holiday. I'm actually always taking a holiday. So I hope to see you again, either here, or maybe if you travel internationally, I might see you in Sweden, or at some international seminars here and there. And thank you very much. Thank you very much. That was very moving. If I had more time, I would run off the stage and then come back in and answer more questions.